Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to this special live 10 o'clock edition of St. Louis on the Air. I'm Alex Heuer. It's been quite a day in political news. Steve Stenger resigned as St. Louis County Executive. That's after the U.S. Attorney's Office announced that Stenger was indicted in a pay-to-play scheme. Here's federal prosecutor Hal Goldsmith earlier today.
There's a pay-to-play scheme, obviously, that involved bribes paid through political donations in exchange for his official acts in awarding and directing others toward contracts, either through St. Louis County or through the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership and the Port Authority.
The County Council met tonight and chose Council Chairman Sam Page as the successor. Joining me in studio to discuss all of today's news is St. Louis Jason Rosenbaum. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Reporter Rachel Lippmann, thank you.
Always, Alex.
And University of Missouri St. Louis political science professor Dave Robertson is with us by phone. Dave, thank you.
Happy to join you. And
I'd also like to invite our listeners to join the conversation. Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 314-382-TALK. Or send us a tweet at STL on air or an email to talk@stlpublicradio.org. Jason, I want to start with you. You were at tonight's emergency meeting, and we know that they selected Council Chairman Sam Page as Stenger's successor, but what was the mood like at this meeting?
It was mixed. There were a lot of municipal officials from predominantly African-American municipalities that were in the county council chambers because they wanted Councilwoman Hazel Irby to be selected as county executive. Had the council picked Irby would have been not only the first African-American woman to serve as county executive, but the first woman, period, to serve in any county-wide executive role. That didn't happen. As you mentioned in the intro, Page was chosen 5-1, with Irby voting no and Page abstaining. And it marks a uncertain time in St. Louis County government. Page obviously has a lot of goodwill right now amongst the council as he was the leader of the anti-Stenger bloc for a couple of years. But just as Page promised transparency and cleaning up corruption, we do have to remember that we're only 4+ years removed from Stenger promising the same thing, and he resigned today amid corruption charges. I'm not trying to say that Page is going to fall into the same corruption traps, but as far as being transparent and also trying to bring people together, sometimes it's easy to promise at the beginning of an administration, and it actually becomes very difficult to follow through on when St. Louis County's factions kind of show themselves.
And I want to talk more in a bit about the future of the county council under Sam Page's leadership, and we'll also hear some audio clips from Sam Page and Hazel Irby. But I want to take a step back and talk about what transpired this morning. And Rachel, I'll turn to you for this. What transpired this morning and when?
So actually this started back on Thursday. That was when a federal grand jury actually indicted Mr. Stenger on these 3 charges. Mail fraud, which means they used the United States Postal Service to further the schemes that they were doing. Bribery, that's pretty clear what it is. It's your standard, you pay me X, I'll do Y for you. And then what's known as honest services, which is part of the federal mail fraud statute. It's based on this idea that if you hire someone or elect them to a post, you are entitled to their honest services. It's basically this kind of understood idea that, you have the right not to be defrauded by these people. The indictment was unsealed on Monday morning. I think the press release landed this morning. Landed in our inbox around 9:30 in the morning. By about noon or a little before that, Stenger had resigned his post as county executive.
More like 10:45.
Okay.
Before noon. You're
before
correct,
noon.
Rachel.
There we go. And then at 1 o'clock, he made his first appearance in front of a federal judge.
Okay. Dave Robertson, you were with us during the program today at noon, and now having heard and been able to distill all of what's happened today, what are some of your takeaways right now?
Well, I can tell you that I'm not going to require my students to read the indictment because it presents politics at its worst. And I hope it's not all like that because I might want to start to teach English if it is. This was a very, very unsavory and unbecoming and dishonest series of transactions go on. And they were transactions. They were efforts to get political donations in return for favors. And it went on for years, and it went on at the highest levels of county government. I thought it was, I wouldn't say shocking after the things I've read, but pretty close to that. I thought it was pretty frank, and I would say that there are some serious legal problems for a whole bunch of people named in that indictment.
As you mentioned, the indictment was quite a study in the English language. It was laced with profanity at times. But in having analyzed various indictments regarding politicians of the past, Rod Blagojevich, the former governor of Illinois, comes to mind. How does this indictment stack against some other indictments that we've seen of prominent politicians?
I think the stakes are lower than in the governor's case, the governor of Illinois' case, in the case of Duke Cunningham, who was a member of Congress in California who took a whole lot of money in return for favors, a whole lot more than the Stenger campaign received, and it was personal money, too. So in terms of the money involved, it really doesn't match up to the problems in bigger jurisdictions. But for St. Louis County, this is a big and stunning event, and it's not going to be forgotten for a very long time.
Would you say that it's unprecedented, Dave Robertson?
Yes, I'd say that.
And the governor, former Governor Eric Greitens, his resignation comes to mind, which was something that I think that maybe political reporters expected more, in that, at least from a breaking news point of view, we were able to plan for more. But how does the effect of the resignation of Stenger and this indictment stack up against the resignation of the former governor in terms of the impact on our listeners here in the St. Louis area?
Well, I think the direct impact may be a little less than the spectacular events of today, because county government keeps going on. People get services. There are a lot of permanent employees in county government, as there are in state government. And in both cases, a lot of things have been going on, as usual, sort of underneath the highest levels of the government. The other thing that strikes me about both those cases, though, is how much impending doom people around the executive and sort of in nearby positions like the county council in this case, how much of an expectation that shoes were going to drop and that they were going to drop hard. So that is a very strong similarity between these cases.
Well, Jason Rosenbaum.
Well, not to give too much of an insight into our reporting process, but the post that you all saw, and by you all I mean listeners, was pre-written on Friday, because a lot of reporters had heard the indictment was coming on Friday, and my prescient editor, Fred Ehrlich, said it might be a good idea to pre-write this, but that just kind of buttresses Professor Robertson's point that no one was really surprised by this, not mainly also because there was a pretty massive subpoena of county government, and just that the accusations of pay-to-play had been lingering around Stenger for years, going back, I think, well before the 2018 campaign against Mark Mantovani. For a lot of different reasons, Mantovani wasn't able to convince a majority of county voters that those were serious enough allegations to get rid of Stenger. It was a very close race. And I don't know. I also noticed that in this election and in the 2014 election, Stenger used a lot of campaign rhetoric that was all about national politics or state politics. He used the former governor to bash Mantovani, and I think that's because people in St. Louis County generally don't know what county government does, and I think that was the type of way to kind of enthuse voters, even though it had a lot of what Stenger was convincing people that got him into some of the messaging that got Stenger into office had actually nothing to do with what he was doing in office.
It
Rachel
reminds me a little bit, and I don't mean this in terms of like the scope of the issues that were in this indictment, but in terms of the way that the Mueller report sort of validated a lot of reporting that big national outlets had done on relationships between President Trump, his campaign officials, Russian officials. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch, two of their reporters have done a very good job reporting out a lot of these names, a lot of these contacts. If you've been following any news articles or, the news closely, these names are going to ring a bell to you. And, even to the extent where the Post-Dispatch is named and quoted, I think, a couple of times
5 or 6
in
times,
this
I think.
indictment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, the credit goes to them for, having their reporting essentially buttressed by these indictments, despite Stenger's repeated denials, which I think he's made here as well, that, oh, no, there's never been any pay to play in my government.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get to a comment that Steve Stenger said on this program. He was a guest on this show in early March and was questioned about the communication that he had with Sheila Sweeney, who was at the time the person in charge of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, and this is what Stenger had to say.
I think that contention goes, I think that's a contention that some of perhaps, political, antagonists might have. But in reality, about $4.5 million of St. Louis County money makes its way to the Economic Development Partnership. And, I think it's completely appropriate that we communicate to whoever the director is of that department as to what the priorities of St. Louis Countyans are through and by their elected leader. And the council is free to do that as well. And I think the council makes their opinion known as well. So I think that it's completely appropriate. And I think, frankly, I would encourage the council to do the very same.
So that's Steve Stenger on this show back in early March, saying that his cozy relationship with Sheila Sweeney, then in charge of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, was not a big deal. In fact, advocating that the council members do much of the same. Dave Robertson, before I let you go, during our show earlier today, you had talked about the importance of the county executive and juxtapose that against the role of the mayor in the city of St. Louis. Can you explain that point again, please?
Sure. The county executive has a lot more power and a lot more independence and autonomy than the mayor of St. Louis. The mayor of St. Louis, for example, can't control the budget very well, has influence on the budget, but really is hamstrung by a complicated budget process. It's collaborative. The county executive has a lot more freedom to spend money, to allocate expenditures, and so the county executive has a lot more power over what I think of as the central nervous system of any government, which is the way you spend money. That gives the county executive a huge amount of influence over what the county does, and I totally agree at the point that a whole lot of people don't appreciate how important the county government is in their lives.
Well, Dave Robertson, thank you for your political analysis. We're going to let you go and continue our conversation with Rachel Lippmann and Jason Rosenbaum, but I want to thank you for your time, Dave Robertson.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Dave Robertson is a political science professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis, and we'll be back in just a moment. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
And welcome back. I'm Alex Heuer. On this special live 10 o'clock edition of St. Louis on the Air, we're discussing a full day of news in St. Louis County. Earlier this evening, the County Council selected Council Chairman Sam Page to serve as interim county executive in the wake of Steve Stenger's resignation. This morning, I'm talking with St. Louis Public Radio reporters Jason Rosenbaum and Rachel Lippmann. Stenger has pleaded not guilty to the charges. I should point that out. But he's, as we have mentioned, he's accused of steering insurance and marketing contracts to a guy named John Rollo. He is mentioned numerous times in the 40-something page indictment. He is quoted at length, emails, texts, I assume. He was a major campaign contributor. And Rachel, explain who John Rollo is beyond just me saying that he worked in insurance.
So that's kind of the essential role here, is that he worked in insurance, had connections to Mr. Stenger through his contributions, wanted to bring Mr. Stenger into kind of his donation orbit. It was actually through a friend of Mr. Rollo that he's named in the indictment. He or she, it's just called an individual, as SW is sort of listed as the conduit into Mr. Stenger. It says in October of 2014, John Rollo is introduced to Stenger by one of his friends. This is this individual, SW. Stenger was at the time campaigning for county executive, and this friend, SW, introduced Rollo to Stenger in the hopes that Stenger could help get Rollo insurance contracts with St. Louis County. We also know that Mr. Rollo was friends with Montel Williams, the talk show host. The thought was that he could help get a contract with Montel Williams to help rehabilitate the image of St. Louis County after the uprising in Ferguson in 2014, following Michael Brown's death. And, he's a prolific campaign donor who also expected, things to happen because of these donations. He made it clear that I'm tired of donating to candidates and not getting anything in return. And the indictment says that, Stenger will help get these insurance, marketing, and consulting contracts, and eventually did secure a contract, and we use the term loosely because it appeared that no work was ever done, to Mr. Rollo in exchange for these campaign contributions.
And at one point, Sheila Sweeney said to John Rollo, and this is in the indictment, said, you need to resubmit your report on what you did because it's the same as what you submitted the last time.
And this looks bad, yes.
Right.
And there's also quotes in there when he is working to get the marketing contract for the I think it's for the Port Authority, that, Sheila Sweeney says to him basically, the number doesn't work. It was a larger number, like $350,000. We need to go lower on this contract in order so that I can push this through the board of these economic development authorities.
And Sheila Sweeney resigned her post from the Economic Development Partnership. But Jason Rosenbaum, do we have a sense of who else this indictment may be targeting, whether there might be more indictments? I want to get both of your thoughts on this.
I don't think it's super clear. I was talking with a couple people who were wondering why John Rollo didn't get indicted too. Because I was wondering, this may seem like a stupid thought, but I was thinking at the beginning of the day, is it a crime for a non-governmental official to offer some governmental official a bribe? Is it only a crime for someone to accept a bribe? And I was told by at least one person who is a good friend of mine who's an attorney and a former assistant attorney general that yes, that is a crime. You cannot do that.
It is actually listed in the federal indictment. It's a state statute that's quoted here. Bribery of a public servant makes it a felony crime for a person to knowingly offer, confer, or agree to confer upon any public servant any benefit, direct or indirect, in return for the public servant's official recommendation, decision, action, or exercise of discretion as a public official.
And the other question is Sheila Sweeney. And I don't know if she, I don't, it is not clear because Hal Goldsmith did not say who talked and who was potentially getting a deal for their cooperation, if that's even happening. It's very possible that Sheila Sweeney decided to talk to the feds in exchange for leniency. But that's just speculation because if you read this indictment, it certainly seems like she did a lot of illegal things, or at least that's what she's accused of.
I mean, I am would be very surprised if there were no more indictments that came down out of this. It may be that they are working with individuals named and unnamed in this indictment in an effort to get the case against Mr. Stenger even more clear than what it is in these indictments. If they are waiting to see if there are additional charges they can bring against Mr. Stenger or under individuals. But I'm reading through this indictment, and there are so many people named who are so very clearly engaged in this quid pro quo activity that how did no one else get indicted? What are they waiting on to issue these other indictments? Because this started with the head. It's not like you can indict up from Mr. Stenger. You could possibly indict laterally to, people at the same level, but this isn't.
And who would that be laterally?
I mean, you could other department heads, perhaps.
Like Jake Zimmerman,
again,
Wesley Bell. Not saying that they're indicted, but
yeah, you could indict sort of at the executive suite level, but it's not like in other cases where they, indict the little guys and hope to kind of build the case up to the top executive. This indictment is at the top.
That's interesting. And do we briefly have a sense of how the investigation played out? There are emails quoted. Were there wiretaps? Jason?
I think it's pretty clear that somebody wore a wire on Stenger, and it was one of his staff. I think it's also pretty clear that members, either current or former members of his staff, cooperated with the feds. And I don't know how many, because Hal Goldsmith didn't say, but when I had seen the subpoena, I thought that it was just going to be like somebody's word against Stenger, and it turns out that there's a lot more voluminous documentation than we all thought.
It's a year-long investigation that is still ongoing. So the subpoena for thousands and thousands of pages of documents that was issued a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
It was a few weeks ago.
A few weeks ago. And Hal Goldsmith wouldn't even say today if they had finished responding to all of those requests for documents. There may still be more out there, but what Mr. Goldsmith said today during his availability remarks to the press after the first hearing today with Mr. Stenger was, this involved emails, text messages. He used the phrase pen orders, which is allowing for wiretaps or sort of other ability to intercept communications. There were cooperating witnesses, documents. The IRS was involved. The Postal Inspection was involved. So it was a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it's still ongoing.
We have about 8 minutes left. Benjamin, a listener on Facebook, asks, is it time to consider a professional county manager? Isn't that what the county executive is supposed to do?
So you're asking, should there be like a unelected county manager similar to unelected city manager? There's no other arrangement like that anywhere in any county in Missouri, because I think that there's a kind of a revulsion against a county government not being run by an elected official. I think the chances of that happening are basically zero.
Mary on Facebook says she would like us to discuss, quote, the accountability for public officials who are pushing for Stenger to become the appointed head of the combined city-county, end quote, until recently. Of course, that refers to the Better Together plan that would merge St. Louis County and St. Louis. Stenger was originally going to be the so-called mega mayor, but then the initiative petition was then changed. Jason, what do you have to say to Mary on Facebook?
I think that's going to be used against the Better Together plan by the merger's antagonists. So I definitely think there'll be some reckoning for that. There's enough time between now and when the merger vote will likely happen in 2020 where maybe that doesn't become a difference. The other reckoning that has to happen, and this needs to be said, is organized labor. There was no other interest group more responsible for putting Stenger in office than unions. And without trying to sound critical of unions and what they do, because this is completely separate from policy, they have to, I would say that labor leaders have to do some soul searching and maybe consider backing candidates that are not as obviously flawed as Stenger. And hopefully they've learned a valuable lesson from this experience, because I don't think they're going to have nearly as easy of a time in county governance with Sam Page as county executive as they did with Steve Stenger, and it's kind of their own fault.
That's a great segue, Jason Rosenbaum, to Sam Page. We have audio of him speaking to the county council in tonight's emergency meeting, and he said that he assures the council and public that he will remain fair.
As County Executive, I will treat this council with the respect that it deserves. I look forward to working with each of you as we lead St. Louis County through the challenges that lay ahead of us. I want to assure everyone in St. Louis County from the very beginning that we will have absolutely no tolerance for pay-to-play politics. No tolerance. We will strive to set a new standard for ethical government, and we will be open and transparent so you can hold us accountable.
That's now County Executive Sam Page, who will serve as County Executive until 2020, until there's a general election in November of 2020, primaries in August. And then it'll basically be an open seat in 2022 again. Is that true?
I guess unless the person who runs in 2020 also wants to run in 2022.
It really depends. I think that there's some speculation on whether Page wants to run in 2020, and it may potentially be kind of an open seat free-for-all. And I also think that even if he ran in 2020, he will not be the only candidate for that seat. And
I was surprised, too, that he actually was willing to take the job even on this kind of interim. I know he doesn't have the official interim tag basis because he's an anesthesiologist. It's a lucrative medical practice. And as I understand it, he has to give it up for the time while he is serving as county executive. It's one of the reasons that Tim Fitch, who represents the 3rd district on the county council, didn't want to become county executive because he would have to give up a lucrative security consulting gig and job with a local company. And so I was kind of actually surprised that Page made the decision to allow his name to be nominated and advanced as the county executive.
I can't say that I'm surprised, given that a lot of people had told me that it was a possibility, but he had told me directly, kind of in conversations that were informal, that he had no desire to be county executive because of his anesthesiologist practice. But times have changed. Mm-hmm. And he's now county executive, so.
Yes, he is. And Council Vice Chairwoman Hazel Irby, had she been seeking the position to become county executive? So she voted against. She was the lone no vote in choosing Sam Page as county executive, but she reassures the citizens of the county that she will remain on the council and work with Sam Page.
I plan to stay in my seat, work hard, work with Sam. We've worked these past couple of years together, but I just hope we don't have what we've had in the past. And that's what I saw this week. I saw promises and commitments, and you have to be careful about the promises you make. So I just ask you all to stay woke and pay attention. You'll see.
All right, that's Hazel Irby urging people to stay woke and pay attention. She was also upset that there was no public comment during the meeting, as I understand it, and I'm sure that there were members of the public who were upset that there was no public comment. But I want to ask you, Jason Rosenbaum, Sam Page now is county executive. What is the future like of his governing? What is the makeup of the council like? Will they go along with him?
I think he'll have a honeymoon period, but I think that just as Stenger's honeymoon period didn't last, because he had one when he started, I don't see the same dynamics at play, primarily because now we have a council that's split evenly between Republicans and Democrats, at least for now. I think there's been some people who think that Republicans can take the 2nd district seat. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think it will be filled by Democrats, a Democratic-leaning seat. But until then, there's going to be partisanly divided government, which may or may not matter. And I think that now that the council is no longer united behind their disdain of Stenger, they could be infighting amongst themselves over some serious policy issues. The council, even the Democrats, have differing views on where county government should go and certain policies. And I think that could complicate Page's tenure considerably. I've known Sam Page for almost 12 years. There's a lot of things that are impressive about him, including the fact that he's an anesthesiologist who's managed to maintain some continuity in politics. But he is not universally beloved. He has made enemies over the years. I mentioned organized labor. They were really upset with him for voting to get rid of an apprenticeship requirement in county government. And it'll remain to be seen how he can lead an executive role, because he's never been in this role before. And there are a lot of other people that clearly want to be county executive. Mark Mantovani potentially could run again. I've been hearing St. Louis County Assessor Jake Zimmerman I don't want to say he's almost sure to jump in 2020, but I think it's very, very likely. And then, I think there were also people that were kind of upset that it's another man as county executive. And you have a lot of very talented and high-ranking women in St. Louis County politics in the state legislature who could clearly make viable runs for this, including Gina Walsh, Jill Shoup, Tracy McCreary, Gina Mitten. I think all of them have to be thinking of possibly running for all intents and purposes, even though it won't technically be an open seat if Sam Page is in there, could be more open than in years past.
And something that we didn't even get to in this conversation is the campaign in which Stenger defeated Charlie Dooley.
Yes.
And basically, my take on it was accused him of corruption. And I think it was you, Jason, that pointed out during the noon show today that really had an effect, especially Charlie Dooley as a black man, being accused of corruption in 15 seconds.
I think that some people saw that as a racist dog whistle. Others thought Dooley was going to lose anyways. But I do think that should give pause to people that use that type of allegations to maybe actually lob it at somebody who actually commits or allegedly commits corrupt acts.
And it already feels like it is the second day story on this first day story. But Rachel, what is your second day story? What are you looking at?
I will be very kind of, again, like I don't know if it's just the second day, but it's what is next for these charges? Who is next?
Jason.
My second day story is where St. Louis County politics goes from here.
Okay, Jason Rosenbaum and Rachel Lippmann, St. Louis Public Radio reporters, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.